whenever you are ready. So go ahead.
My name is Bill. Yeah, my name is Bill Curry. Yep, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia on October 21st, 1942. My mom was 20 years old, and she was about 10 months pregnant. My father was in the Army. His name was Willie Alexander Curry. He had to leave to go back to Fort Hood, Texas, because we were in the middle of World War II. And he said to his 20-year-old wife, "Don't you dare name this child after me if it happens to be a boy." In those days, nobody knew what the gender was prior to birth. She said, "Okay, that's fine." So he went back to Fort Hood, Texas. I was born the next day, and she named me William Alexander Curry. So I'm sort of a junior to a infantry officer. My dad was a very tough guy, but a good guy, and mom was wonderful. And we grew up in College Park, Georgia. And if anybody's ever flown into Atlanta, College Park is one of the little towns that sits just adjacent to the runway. In College Park, I met the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. She also happened to be the best student in our school. And I decided by the sixth grade, I announced that I was going to marry her. And my father said, "That is the best idea you've ever had. You want to marry Carolyn Newton." She was not interested. I was short and chubby. I was shorter than her, actually. She was 5'2". But by the time we became seniors in high school, we started dating. My other goal in life was to pitch for the New York Yankees. And so on my major goals, I was 50% successful because as of this coming December the 15th, Carol and I will celebrate our 60th wedding anniversary. So that part of my life worked out beautifully. We have 2 children, 7 grandchildren. They're all wonderful. I'm sure all your students there are also wonderful. And I was blessed to be drafted by the Green Bay Packers when Vince Lombardi was in his prime. I was a student and a student athlete at Georgia Tech at the time. And my wife and I, Carol and I, were already married. We married in our junior year. She has continued to be a brilliant scholar, earned her master's and her PhD after she had our children and after they became school age. Then she went back to school. And people said, "Well, what did you major in?" She said, 1040. Well, Georgia State is the downtown school in Atlanta. And they said, "Well, what does that mean, Carol, in 1040? She said, "That means that I can drive the kids to school and drive to Georgia State, and whatever's offered by the history department at 10:40 a.m., that's what I take." She did that 14 years, never made a B, earned her master's and her PhD, and now she writes books. Our kids are, our daughter has 2 daughters and is head of the English department at a local high school, and our son has 5 boys, and they live in Charlottesville, Virginia, not far from you. And he is with Boston Scientific in management. So we've been blessed in a million different ways, one of which was to play for 10 years in the NFL. And I think that's what attracts the most attention when I have interviews like this. So that's just a broad outline. My philosophy of life is to try to be the best that I can be with what God gave me, and to try to help as many other people as I possibly can.
All right. I think kind of what you said of interest in the NFL. I think a lot of the kids are going to have questions about the NFL and about you coaching in college football. So I'm going to see if anybody has a question here. And then I kind of have a list of questions that they wrote out if anybody's too shy to ask, but they've done a pretty good job asking. So so we're just going to pass around the computer here. If you have a question, you can take your mask down to ask it. That's fine. Anybody want to go first here? All right. All right. David's going to senior here, football player. He's going to ask you a question.
Hello. I'm
Hi,
David.
David. How are you?
Good. How are you?
You can take your mask off. I don't have mine on.
What's the difference, like the environment of the first Super Bowl compared to now? Like, is there a big difference?
What a great question. Honest to goodness. By the way, I'll just show you now. Can you see me? Can you see this?
Yeah.
That's the ring from Super Bowl I.
Oh, no.
I thought I would put that on today. I've got 3 of them, but this is the one that everybody seems to be the most interested in looking at. They don't look anything like as ostentatious as today's versions. Today's rings are just huge, and that's emblematic of the game. The game we played seemed like a family scrimmage. We were in the Los Angeles Coliseum that seated about 105,000. I think we had 60,000 at the game, and the big attraction seemed to be the movie stars that were sitting in the stands, not the game. It was the weirdest feeling. It just seemed very strange because we were used to playing in front of packed houses in Green Bay or Baltimore or Detroit or wherever we were playing. And I think it took us a while to get motivated. I had to leave the game with an injury. It was the only game all year long that I didn't play the whole game. And I really regret that. But Ken Bowman, who went in to play center, did a great job. And of course, our team did a great job. But it was very different than today's Super Bowls. It was just almost quiet. Seems strange. But that's a great question, though.
Anybody got a question?
Mason?
All right. While they're coming up with questions, why don't you talk a little bit about, because we're looking at different people in the NFL, and we've looked at some of the guys from the 1960s and 70s. Talk about playing with Bart, Starr, and Johnny Onitis, maybe how they were similar and how they were different.
They were both great human beings, first of all. They could stick their head in the huddle, and if you didn't know their name, if you'd never heard of either one of them, after a few minutes, you would follow them. They were natural leaders. Bart became my mentor. He became like a big brother to me. He adopted me the day I reported to the Green Bay Packers and really never left my side until the day he died a couple of years ago. He became really like family to me. Onitis was a little more distant, but just as effective. And what they brought, of course, they were great at throwing the football and calling plays. They both called all their own plays. Nobody sent any plays in. If you sent, especially with Onitis, if you tried to send a play into Onitis, he would send the guy back to the bench and ignore the coach and just call whatever he wanted. Whatever they called, we knew was the best thing that could have been called. We knew that because we had them in the huddle, that we had an advantage over our opponent. And even more important than that, I think, our opponents knew that we had an advantage. They knew that those guys were going to pull something out of the air or out of their hat or from somewhere and find a way to beat them before the game was over. And it was a tremendous advantage competitively. Off the field, they were both great guys and great fun to be with.
All right. Anybody have a question here? All right. Here's a senior, Mason Dean.
Oh, Mr. Curry.
How are you, Mason?
Pretty good. Out of the 4 teams that you played with in the NFL, which team did you like to play on the most?
The team that I liked playing on the best was the Baltimore Colts. There were a couple of reasons for that. Number one, when I was with the Packers, I was a baby. I had not really matured, and I wasn't. There's a certain toughness you have to be a starting player in the National Football League, and I didn't have that while I was with the Packers, and I regret that very much. And when Vince Lombardi put me on the expansion list, which he did, for the new team, which was to be the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints claimed me, I blamed him. I thought that was his fault. Well, that wasn't his fault. That was my fault. That's because I wasn't a real good player. I grew up and became a much better player in Baltimore, and we had the privilege of staying there for 6 years, and we had great teams. Sometimes we won the world championship, sometimes we didn't, but we had great teams, meaning we had, and the Packers also had great human beings. I learned more from my teammates on those two teams than in any other stage in my life. I learned about racism. You can't be a racist. The good teams don't allow racism, period. No racist. If you got racists in your locker room, you will not win in the National Football League. You accept everybody. It doesn't mean we're all buddy-buddy. It means that we get along, we respect each other. It doesn't matter what color your skin is or what your religion is or where you went to high school or any of that stuff. It just matters, this is my teammate and I'm not going to let him down. Those teams had that. Those coaches had that. That was Lombardi's calling card. He would not tolerate racism. Shula, same thing. So I learned so much from just being there and being around those guys and having the privilege of playing on the team with them. Is something that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. In the 27 years that I coached, I tried to teach my players as much as I could of what I learned from those great coaches and those great players, those great teammates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Jackson Mills. I'm the center here at PHS. And I was wondering, like, what was your favorite part of football? Was it the coaching or the playing?
I saw that question in the list of questions, and I thought that was interesting that you would ask, Jackson, although I didn't know you asked it. I love both of them. For actual, just pure selfish fun, it's a lot more fun to be responsible for only one guy. If I'm only responsible for my performance, if I'm a player and I'm not responsible for what happens with the left tackle or the free safety, then it's a lot less preparation and it's a lot less to worry about. If I'm responsible for everybody, that's constant pressure. And
Mr.
did we lose that
Yeah,
answer?
our internet went out there for a second. So you were talking about enjoying playing and being responsible for one person. We lost you about halfway through there.
Well, it's more fun when you're just responsible for one person, but it's more satisfying. It's more gratifying lifelong to have been able to train young men to learn how to behave themselves and how to get along despite their differences and to create a team. So it's a mixed bag. There's more fun when you're just responsible for one guy yourself, and there's more joy in coaching a whole bunch of people, teaching them how to behave when they're living in the middle of a downtown 105 teenage males 365 days a year, and the coach is responsible for all of them all the time. That can be very demanding. That can be painstaking and exhausting, but it's more than worth it. And now I'm almost 80 years old, and I hear from one or more of them almost every day of my life. And I think that's the most gratifying of all. I love them, and to find out that they actually listened to some of the lessons that we were teaching is very gratifying.
All right. Someone have a question? Okay. All right. Here is David. He's the quarterback of the football team.
Hi, Mr. Curry.
Hi, did you say your name is David?
Yes, sir.
And you're the QB?
Yeah.
I spent 20 years protecting guys like you.
Yeah.
My job was to hike the ball and be run over slowly so that you could set up and throw a football.
Yeah,
And, it was okay.
Yeah, we appreciate the line. What do you think the biggest difference, like when you watch the game now, is from when you played?
Well, the biggest difference, the most obvious difference, is the guys are so much bigger and so much faster than we were. Anybody from my era that tells you that he could play today is a joke, unless it's one of our greatest players. I mean, Walter Payton could have played anytime. Joe Green could have played anytime, any era. Merlin Olsen could have played in any era. You don't know those names, but those guys are all in the Hall of Fame. But the rest of us, just regular human beings, like I weighed 235 pounds playing center in the NFL. I'd be a water boy today. The centers weigh 290. The lightest centers weigh 290. So that's the biggest change. They're so much bigger and faster. And then the offenses and defenses are far more sophisticated than what we had. They spread the field. They have a more variety of formations. They call things from the bench. The quarterback, if you play in the NFL, you're going to have a microphone in your helmet, and you're going to be communicating with the coaches all the time. And I suppose there's some good things about that and some bad things. If it was Unitas, he wouldn't even, I promise you, he wouldn't even wear it. He wouldn't, he never would. If a play came in from the bench, he'd send the guy back to the bench. So I don't know what Bart Starr would have done, but today's everything about the game is more sophisticated, and it's played at a much higher rate of speed. The guys are so fast. The speed of the game is stunning just to watch.
All right. We're getting all kinds of linemen to ask you questions here. This is Grant.
What do you miss most about coaching and playing football?
I miss the guys. I love being around them, even though there were days when they would drive me crazy. I could drive them crazy too if I needed to. I might have two guys. One of them's from Parkersburg, West Virginia. One of them's from South Central Los Angeles. And they look at me and come to me and say, "I'm not dressing next to that guy." And I say, "Yes, you are." And they said, "No, we're not." And I say, yeah. And they say, "You can't do that." I say, "I can do anything I want to. I'm the head coach. You can go home or you can dress next to this guy." So I had the privilege of forcing them to get to know each other, even though they came from entirely different worlds. And I've actually had those same two guys, and both of them were tough as nails. Both of them were good guys. They just didn't like each other. They thought they didn't like each other. I had them come back a couple of years later and say, "Coach, I actually love this guy." You know why? Because they figured out, dressing next to each other, that the sweat smells the same on everybody every day. And when you get your mouth blooded out there in a Oklahoma drill with the O line and the D line, everybody's blood is the same color. And when people figure that out, they learn how to get along. That's what our country needs right now, is a few Oklahoma drills. But we can't do that.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, taking you to William. Give me just 1 second. All right, William.
Hey, Mr. Curry.
Hello, how are you, William?
Yeah.
That's a great name.
I was wondering about your initial reaction and your reaction during the game about the guarantee.
Super Bowl III.
Yeah.
We didn't pay any attention to that. I mean, other people guaranteed they were going to beat us too. We were 15-1. The one game we lost was to Cleveland, and we just beat them 34-0 in their stadium for the NFL championship. So we just prepared and got ready to play the game, and then we didn't play well. We turned the ball over. We missed short field goals. We didn't tackle well. They beat us. It's a shame, but there's nothing you can say about it except the Jets deserved to win, and they were the world champions. But we didn't pay any attention to anybody's predictions. Joe Namath is a very good friend of mine. We played together in the Senior Bowl. I was the center and he was the quarterback, and I was prepared to dislike him because they hammered us. The Alabama beat Georgia Tech when we played against each other. But you can't be on the field with Namath and dislike him. And that's one of the reasons he was a great leader. But we didn't pay any attention to all the pregame stuff. We should have paid more attention during the game. Maybe we wouldn't have got beat.
Was there any point during the game that you could definitively say he was going to win?
Well, I've got a lot of weaknesses and a lot of sinful things in my life, but there's one strong suit I have. I never, ever think we're going to lose. When the final gun goes off, if we have less points than the other team, I think, hey, we're supposed to keep playing here. We're supposed to keep playing until my team wins. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse, but I've had it since I was your age. I just think we're going to win. There've been plenty of times that wasn't true, but I felt like all the way through the performance, I felt like that. And then there were times I wanted to quit. And back to that stuff about my teammates, when you really care about your teammates, you look at your buddy next to you and you're about to die, you can't breathe, you've lost about 15 pounds in the heat, and you're thinking about packing it in, you can't do it because you can't let your teammate down. That's the best stuff. So we never thought about losing before the fact, but after the fact, we certainly have been reminded 50 million times since then, hey, you got beat, and it was predicted by Namath, and yep, Joe did it. My wife was prepared to detest him, but we invited him to dinner when I was coaching at Alabama, and when he walked out of the house, she said, well, I was wrong. He's a great guy. You were right. So we don't hold anything against those guys.
Thank you.
Sure would like to play him again, though.
Anybody got a question? Okay. All right. Here is Ethan, who's actually William's brother.
What was
Hello, Ethan.
What was the most mentally challenging game you ever played or coached in?
Wow, there were a lot of those mentally challenging. Coaching is so much more mentally challenging than playing, because like I said before, if you're playing, I might have been responsible to make offensive line calls. So in that respect, I was responsible for protections, but that was not nearly as complex as being responsible for both sides of the ball and the kicking game and all of that. So did you ask me the most complex game that I coached in or played in?
The hardest game
Question?
mentally.
The hardest game mentally.
Nice, thank you.
That's really hard to say. I think I think Super Bowl five as a player, because we were just stoned by the Dallas defense. We ended up winning the game, but the offense felt like we had lost the game because we tried everything and we couldn't make anything work. Our defense bailed us out, and Jim O'Brien kicked a field goal and we won the game. As for coaching, I think the most demanding game was probably the Alabama-Auburn game, in which we played at Auburn for the first time in the history of the rivalry. And I thought we would play a great game, and we did not. And I have always felt like that I could have done a better job of preparing our team, because we were undefeated going into the game and we ended up losing.
All right, I have a few, but a big Bears fan who wants to know what it was like playing in the Packers-Bears rivalry.
It was a nightmare for me, because when we played against the Bears, that meant that my job was to block Dick Butkus. And Butkus was one of the top 2 or 3 football players that ever played, I think. And he was the toughest guy for me to block. We came out of college and played in a couple of all-star games together. And so we were friends off the field, but he didn't have any friends on the field. And you never knew what he was going to do. He would tackle people and knock them out. Coach Lombardi, the first time he saw Butkus play, we were sitting in the film room and he said, "I think this guy's overrated. I think he's stiff. I think he's going to end up being a defensive tackle. He's not flexible enough to be a good middle linebacker." So then we play the Bears later in the year, and Butkus is knocking people out and knocking helmets off and taking the ball away from Jimmy Taylor, running down the field with it. We were watching that film. Lombardi stopped the projector and looked around the room. He said, "I was wrong about that guy." So playing against the Bears was very intense, but it was even worse for me.
Gotcha. Anybody have a question? Even if you already asked a question, you can ask another one. That's fine. All right. Well, here you go. Hold on one second.
Make it a 40. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like playing when it was really cold in Lambeau in the playoffs and stuff?
Everybody talks about how cold it gets in Lambeau, and you'll notice the players don't look particularly uncomfortable. If you watch the players, a lot of them are out there with no long sleeves and all that. And here's the reason. When you play in a game, you go on the field, you hope you have a 10-play drive or 12-play drive, but you're working up a sweat. Even in the coldest weather, your blood is circulating, so you're not sitting there freezing. Then when you come off the field, you put your hood on, and now they have warmed benches. You go sit on a warmed bench next to the heat machine. And when we were playing, we had these heat blowers. You put your hood on, which is a big, thick thing. You've seen them on the sideline. You put your hood on and go stand next to the heater, and it blows hot air on you, and you stay warm. And then you run out on the field, and you like for me, my rookie year, I was just a special teams player. So I had to run out there and cover a kickoff or snap for a punt or snap for a field goal. And I thought it was going to be terrible. And it wasn't bad at all, because you could always get warmed back up on the sideline. So it's not as bad as it looks. What was really bad then in those days was practice, because we didn't have an indoor facility. Now they do. We practiced outside. We didn't have any heaters out there. We had frozen field. Even if we practiced on Lambeau, it was like wearing football cleats on an ice rink. and you'd be slipping and falling down. That's what the hardest part to me was, practicing in Green Bay when they didn't have an indoor facility. That's when you got really cold.
I'm going to ask a couple that kids wrote down that they're just a little shy, camera shy. Right now in
Okay.
college football, things are obviously changing quickly with the transfer portal and the idea of paying players. What are your thoughts on kind of the direction of college football right now?
Well, I was involved with the NFL Players Association when we started making moves in an attempt to improve our lot and to have a better pension plan for our families, to have some flexibility in our employment, not total free agency. We knew better than that. We knew we weren't going to get that, but we hoped that we would have some way of moving from one franchise to another sometime during our career. This was back in the 70s. And we saw the intransigence of the owners. And I thought that it probably wasn't going to change for 50 years, but the players were tougher than I had assumed, because then after I left playing and I was coaching at Georgia Tech, the first time the players struck the regular season and shut down those TV contracts, that's when the players took over the revenues. And now the players are extremely well paid, as you know, just from reading their contracts. It's stunning. Well, the college players are looking at all that. They're not stupid. Now, they know they're not going to sign contracts and make $10 million, but they see their names up in lights. They see their images on billboards. Somebody's being paid a lot of money for that. And a few years ago, the Northwestern players organized as if to become a union, and their coach advocated for them to do that, Pat Fitzgerald. So I just thought that it was a matter of time, and I don't think anybody had to be particularly smart. A matter of time before the name, image, and likeness thing became reality. I didn't know it would happen this fast, and I didn't know that there would be this big a demand. I didn't know you'd be getting $1 million contracts already. The Alabama quarterback made $1 million last year before he ever played a game. Before he played a game. Then he went and won the Heisman Trophy. What do you think he's going to make now? It's going to be substantial. Is that good? Is that bad? We don't know yet. But we do know that this is the United States of America, and if you're good at something, you should be able to earn a living at that. And a lot of the guys that play our sport do not come from wealthy environments. They come from backgrounds where they can really help their parents by earning some extra money. As for the transfer portal, as a coach, I'm not saying it's not good. I don't know if it's good or bad. I just know, for me, if I were coaching, it would be a nightmare, because the way we prospered, we would take undersized guys like Bill Curry, like me, and we would work with them for years, 2, 3, 4 years, and get them in the weight room and get stronger and get bigger. And then they would be starters for a couple of years. And we had really good teams with people that had been redshirted, that had gotten themselves much stronger. Now, I'm afraid if a young man is in our sport is not playing, I'm afraid he's just going to walk in and transfer. So he transfers to another school. Are they going to give him a fair chance? Maybe. I hope so, but I don't know that. So I think there are going to be some real big success stories, and there are going to be some real sad stories that come from this. But that's just me speculating. I really don't know.
I'm going to change it to the NFL a little bit. I thought this was a good question, and we looked up about a lot of the great coaches in NFL history of what would be some similarities and differences between Coach Lombardi and Coach Shula.
Well, first of all, both of them insisted. Insisted is not a strong enough word. You didn't dare look down your nose at a teammate. You didn't dare act like a racist on that team. They would get rid of you so fast that nobody would even know you were there. So you learn to accept each other. If we had racists on the team, I guarantee you we didn't know it because they kept their mouths shut and they got along with the guys on the team. And I imagine many of them had their lives changed because we had so many great guys, black and white, on our teams. That the African-American guys actually educated me because I came from a world where I'd never been in a huddle with an African-American person. When I got to Green Bay, I thought those guys would kill me and run me off, but that's not what they did. They embraced me. They taught me how to behave and changed my life. Lombardi and Shula created a culture that demanded that each person be treated with respect. I think that's the main reason that we were so hard to beat. We also had really good players. They both had an uncanny knack for picking the right players and getting rid of the ones that they should have gotten rid of. And I know because I was one of the ones that Lombardi got rid of, and I resented him for that. But he was right. I was wrong. It took me years to confess that. But I went to see him when he was in the hospital on his deathbed, and I apologized, and he forgave me, and he didn't have to do that. That was life-changing for me. He was a man of faith, so is Shula. They didn't stand up and preach the Christian faith, but they both lived it imperfectly, yes, but as well as they could. And we knew that. And especially Lombardi talked about priorities, your religion, your family, and the Green Bay Packers. Those will be your priorities. And so when I got in college, our priorities were your religion, your family, your education, our football team, and having fun. So those were our 5 things that we tried to make. Those were our priorities. And I got those from Lombardi and Shula. And I had a great college coach named Bobby Dodd, who made us go to every single class. I would have never graduated from Georgia Tech if he had not made us go to every class. So I always did that with my guys. Whether you like it or not, you show up at every class. At Georgia Tech, there were years where we had to go to class on Saturday morning. So I might have calculus at 8 o'clock, physics at 9 o'clock, and Alabama at 2 o'clock on the same day. And you better be in those classes because Coach Dodd would know if you weren't. And we were more scared of him than we were Alabama.
All right, anybody got a question? Super Bowl, coaching Alabama? Anybody? All right. Here is Sam.
What's up, Sam? Who's your favorite team now?
Another great question. Well, the Baltimore Colts kind of disappeared. They went to another town. And every now and then my wife will turn on a game and the Indianapolis Colts will be playing and she'll say, look at those guys, they got our uniforms on. I said, honey, those are not our uniforms. They belong to that franchise. They can take them anywhere they want to. They can take them to Yugoslavia if they want to. So there's something about the uniforms. And I think the fact that she loves the Packer uniforms because they're the prettiest influences her. But I think the whole mystique of the Green Bay thing, that it's a small community, and the fact that I had the privilege of coaching there for 4 years with Bart Starr, who's one of my favorite human beings of all time. I think that had something to do with it, but the team we find ourselves pulling for almost without thinking about it is the Green Bay Packers, probably more than any of the others. Sometimes we'll get attached to a certain player, but we really love the Packers.
Oh, sorry for the loss. You'll get them next year.
Yeah, I've got to get the special teams fixed.
Yeah, right, yeah. All right, anybody? Okay, all right, we got your center here, Jackson.
I was wondering, what was the most important lesson that you learned from playing football in general, or like from one of your coaches?
Wow, what a great notion. I learned it from many coaches, but I learned it most vividly at a time when I was down and out.
Good job,
I just, are they giving you a hard time, Jackson?
No, the internet just,
Yeah, it seems like the internet
okay.
right where Jackson is sitting doesn't work very well. So he asks great questions, but it kind of comes and goes.
Yeah, he does.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, I had been at Georgia Tech. If you're ever in a situation and you don't think you've gotten a fair chance, I had been at Georgia Tech for 4 years and I had never started a game, not a single game. And I just married the most wonderful girl in the world. And we went to a bowl game, the Bluebonnet Bowl out in Texas. And she was allowed to come with us. It was like a honeymoon for us. And I didn't get to play. And my jersey was clean at the end of the game. And I made up my mind. I had 2 more years of eligibility because I'd been redshirted. I made up my mind I was going to find a way to get on the field and get a chance to play. And so I went to one of our coaches and I said, Coach, what have I got to do to get a chance to play? He said, don't worry about it, Bill. You're never going to play. You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. You don't move your feet well enough. And I'm sorry. He wasn't being a bad guy. He thought he was telling me the truth. And it broke my heart. I was crushed. And within a day or two, another coach came to my locker, and his name was John Robert Bell. And this is one of the great lessons I learned from coaches. He grabbed me by the shoulder and looked me in the eye. He said, Bill, I know you can play. Why don't you come down to the practice field early with me and let's work on your footwork? Well, I played 12 more years. I played in 4 world championship games. I had the privilege of snapping the ball to the greatest quarterbacks that ever lived up until that time. Up until that time, they were the greatest quarterback. I had the privilege of being their personal protector. I had the privilege of learning that there were things that I could do that I had never dreamed, all because a great coach believed in me. So that was the best lesson I think I ever learned. And the next quickly thereafter was the lesson of accepting all people the same, no matter what color their skin is, no matter what their religion is, or their politics, or where they come from, or how they talk. Just accept them as teammates, give them a chance, help them to do better, and you'll end up having a friend for life. And it really does last for life. Those are the best lessons I learned, and I learned them from coach.
Our internet kind of went out again on us there. We have a few more questions if you're willing to answer.
Sure.
Anybody got one? I've got, okay. All right, here is Braden.
Evening, sir.
Hello, what's your name?
Braden.
Okay, Braden, what's up?
So I want to know how did the civil rights movement affect your life?
Drastically. In ways that I'm still discovering after all these years. I grew up in the Jim Crow South, where there was rampant racism. Then I went north thinking that it was going to be different up there. It was not different at all. It was the same kind of racism in the north that there was in the south. It's just that they didn't talk about it as much. Our African-American players with the Packers very often couldn't find a place to live because they would read about a rental unit being available. They'd drive over there, and when the owners saw them, suddenly that unit was already spoken for. So that blew my mind. So I ended up thinking about it an awful lot, and I really thought that those African-American guys would hear my Southern accent and reject me. But the captain of our defense was named Willie Davis, and led by Willie Davis, they took me in, they talked to me, they embraced me, they taught me how to say certain things that would not be offensive to the African-American players. And it drastically changed my life. And the civil rights movement was part and parcel of that. My wife and I walked in Dr. King's funeral cortege. Andrew Young, who was one of Dr. King's right-hand men, has become one of our best friends. He befriended us when I was coaching at Georgia Tech and helped us recruit. The civil rights movement has been a huge part of everything I've done with our teams. We've tried to be an active part of inclusivity of all kinds of people. And I'm grateful that I had those great influence. John Mackey, the great tight end for the Baltimore Colts, and the first president of the combined NFL Players Association, took me in, and when I got to Baltimore, and he and his wife Sylvia were powerful, positive influences on Carolyn and me. Great question.
Real quick, while I'm taking you to William, can you talk about what it was like coaching at Alabama compared to the other universities that you coached at?
There was no comparison. When an Alabama player runs on the practice field or the game field, you never have to motivate that player. He knows why he's there. He's been trained since he was in the cradle. If you're going to be an Alabama Crimson Tide football player, you're going to be full speed, and it's going to be vitally important. And so it's a tremendous competitive advantage. And when you combine that with a great coach like Saban, it's just almost impossible to beat those guys. And sometimes they have better players than the other team. The last few years, they have had better players, and sometimes they don't. But whether they do or not, you're still in for a war when you play Alabama, because they will not give up and they will not slack in their effort ever. And I'm talking about from the smallest drill in practice to everything they do. What they think about is winning the football game. And there's some good things about that. If you're the coach, it's a great thing. But sometimes the physics teachers weren't too excited about it. We had to, how shall I say, we had to encourage them to go to class. We had to do the same thing with the Georgia Tech guys.
When you were playing in Super Bowl I up until now, where would you say that the safety equipment really started getting pumped out? like where it was becoming safe beyond what you had, say, Super Bowl V.
Do you mean, did you say equipment?
Yeah, like shoulder pads, helmet pads.
I don't think it started changing until recently. And I think, I'm just looking at the shoulder pads now, and I think they're ridiculous. I think there are going to be more shoulder problems now than we had because they're wearing little bitty pads. I don't know how they're going to get away with that if they're using their shoulders to block. Now, a lot of the big linemen are not using their shoulders; they're using their hands. They're grabbing the guy. You just watch Sunday when they play, and you'll see that we couldn't get away with that. So the rules kind of evolve, and what the officials are calling kind of evolves. There is no helmet that's going to protect you in the sport of football because the worst injuries, the worst concussions come when the brain collides with the interior of your skull. So no matter what kind of padding you have on the outside, that doesn't keep your brain from hitting the inside of your skull. So what the league is doing, and I think wisely, is that they're making it illegal to hit with your head. Now, people are still doing it, but it's not, and if you target, there's something called a targeting foul. If you target and you hit with the top of your headgear, and you hit the headgear of the other player, you're going to be kicked out of the game. And that's what the guys don't want. Nobody wants to lead the game. You don't want to go in that locker room and have your teammates glaring at you because you didn't finish the game. So I think that's going to save more lives than the equipment.
Was there definitively one or multiple scenarios that pushed the safety to go further and further?
Yes, I believe there were. I believe the Mike Webster case, if you're familiar with it, Mike Webster of the Pittsburgh Steelers was a Hall of Fame center. He died underneath an overpass in Pittsburgh, homeless. I believe the Nick Bonacani case, one of the smartest guys I've ever known, the middle linebacker for the undefeated Dolphin team of 72, Notre Dame graduate, brilliant lawyer, looked into the camera a couple of years ago and said, "I can't tie my shoes." And now he's dead. I think Marty Schottenheimer, one of the smartest coaches we ever had, the fact that we lost him, I think those cases forced the owners. John Mackey, the brilliant, and actually voted the greatest tight end of all time, and almost like a brother to me. We lost John in 2011 to frontal lobe dementia. I think that case sent reverberations through the league because one of the speakers at John's funeral was the league commissioner. He didn't have to be there. I thought that was significant. So I think there's a lot going on, and the science is being respected now rather than ridiculed by the league.
So you're saying that they have paid attention mostly to the helmet because of all these brain injuries that are happening because of head-on collisions.
That's right. I believe that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we have time for two more questions. We've got Kyle Hall. He is a senior. He's wanting to play college football next year. So,
Hello, sir. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. What's your first name? What's your name?
Kyle Hall.
Kyle, where are you going?
What?
Where are you going to play next year?
Probably Alderson Broad is some like B2 school in the middle of nowhere.
I think that's great. I think that's probably what we all should have done. Go ahead. What's your question?
Do you think if you were in your prime peak body right now, like you were when you were younger, do
do you think you lay out these young bloods like Aaron Donald, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, and all of them?
Would I lay them out?
Yeah.
No, I think they would lay me out. I
You think so?
I think I would have to resort to double teams. The nice thing I had is I made the blocking calls. So if I had to mess with Aaron Donald, he would never know who was going to hit him next. Because if Aaron Donald knows who's blocking on him, you're dead. So we would use a lot of subterfuge on Aaron. Nothing illegal. We wouldn't grab him or hold him. But you don't know, you're too young, but we had some guys named Merlin Olsen and Joe Green and Alan Page and Jim Marshall. They were just like Aaron Donald, except they were bigger and they were faster. I'm not saying they were better players because he is awesome. And I watch him. I don't know how he does it, but we would have to double him or not. We'd have to make him think, and we would find a way to make him think so that he wouldn't just take away our whole offense, because he can shut you down. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard he lines up in front of a guard and says, "You don't have a chance today." And unfortunately, that's often true.
All right, I think this is going to be the last question. The other interviews that we've done, we've ended with this. So we have a lot of seniors here. If you were to give one or two pieces of life advice before they leave high school, what advice would you give to them?
Be humble. Look in the mirror every morning and ask God, please help me to see where I need to improve today. Please help me to be a force for good in this country, in my community. Please help me to love all people, even the ones I don't particularly like. Help me to love them to the best of my ability. I can't do it by myself. I need you. Then the second bit of advice I would give you is to keep your priorities in order, your faith, your family, then whatever else you're interested in. If you're a football player, your faith, your family, your education, which is far more important than football, and then your team, and then having a good time. You can do all of those things if you keep them in order. If you let them get out of order, if that fun jumps up to the top, then that's how you get in trouble. And I know, because I've not only have I done it to myself, I've seen my players do it to themselves. So ask God how you can be humble and kind to all people, and how you can improve each day and keep your priorities in order. And you can have a wonderful life and be a good example to others.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, especially since it was planned for last week and then we had to reschedule. We just really, really appreciate you agreeing to this.
Well, I'm just delighted to be included. Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you for all those really good questions. I was surprised. That was very, very good. A lot of thinking.
Well, thank you very much. We truly appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.